Hey there, my name is James Lee. Welcome to another segment of 5149 on Breaking Points. And today I've got a great segment for you about how Big Pharma worldwide stands nearly unchallenged in their ability to dictate government health policies to ensure that their own financial interests always supersede all other considerations. I say nearly unchallenged for a reason.
Here's an update on the vaccine front. India's confirmed that we will not be buying Pfizer or Moderna COVID shots. Why? Because India's confirmed that our domestic output of more affordable and easier to store vaccines has jumped, it's increased. This essentially means that the two globally popular vaccines, which the makers have pledged not to sell to private parties during the pandemic, will not be available in India.
The story isn't new. I think it kind of flew under the radar for the most part, but it is 100% worth diving into, in my opinion, because don't you find it at least just a little bit odd that the second most populous country in the world did not approve the sale of either the Pfizer or Moderna mRNA COVID-19 vaccines?
Both vaccines work on the same technology. India wants them too, but on its own terms.
We are currently discussing with the Indian government an expedited approval pathway to make our Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine available for use in the country.
But look at their demands. Pfizer wants indemnity, a legal exemption from future lawsuits over their vaccines. Countries like the United States and Britain have signed such clauses. It basically means that if the vaccine maker is sued in India, it will be the government's problem, not the company's. India has not given such indemnity to any vaccine producer. Why should Pfizer be the exception?
Great question. Why should they be the exception? Why should they be afforded 100% of the financial upside of selling billions of doses of their product, but take none of the risk? I guess that's what I would do if I was a multinational biopharma manufacturer, but I can't exactly just say that out loud, though. I think it's best if we conjure something else up. This is from a CNBC article back in 2020. Quote, "The legal immunity granted to pharmaceutical companies doesn't just guard them against lawsuits. It helps lower the cost of the immunizations. The government doesn't want people suing the companies making the COVID vaccine because then the manufacturers would probably charge the government a higher price per person per dose." Anybody buy that rationale? Oh, it's for us. Well, according to the New York Times, the U.S. did not pay less for the COVID-19 vaccine. In fact, it was reported that we paid more than many other countries. All right, whatever. They charge what they charge because at the time we needed the vaccines, and they also, I guess it was somewhat reasonable that they didn't want to be liable if anything went wrong because the times were so unprecedented, quote unquote. This next part is from Reuters. Quote, "Unlike other companies conducting small studies in India for foreign developed vaccines, Pfizer had sought an exception citing approvals it had received elsewhere based on trials done in countries such as the United States and Germany. Indian health officials say they generally ask for so-called bridging trials to determine if a vaccine is safe and generates an immune response in its citizens." I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but looking back, I think this is kind of incredible. No, the hubris, Pfizer, Moderna, they demanded not only indemnity, meaning they assume no legal responsibility or risk for their product, but they also refused to do local clinical trials to ensure the safety and efficacy of their product. Is it not a little bit too transparent that all they care about is selling the product, making money, and everything else is kind of secondary? Kudos to India, I guess, for making such reasonable requests, but it does kind of leave me wondering, how in the world did they get everybody else on board with this? Once again, hindsight, deadly pandemic. They had the so-called antidote, I guess, so whatever they say goes.
I want to ask you also about a very important issue of vaccine hesitancy. Even folks who get most of their vaccines normally might be hesitant about these vaccines because they were developed so quickly. What do you tell those folks who might be saying, I'm going to wait a few months before I get this one?
This is a vaccine that was developed without cutting corners from a company with 171 years of credentials. This is a vaccine that was developed in the spotlight, in the daylight, with all the data being put in servers. And this is a vaccine that is getting approved by all authorities in the world. So That should say something to them.
What does it say? 171 years of credentials with plenty of scandals throughout. Left out that part. And not all the data was made available to the public. And also a little bit of circular logic there. Why are these vaccines safe and effective? Well, because they've been approved by all the authorities in the world. How are they approved? Well, they were approved because we said that they were safe and effective. I'll tell you, that kind of logic only checks out because more than 2/3 of Congress cashed a pharma campaign check in 2020. I've reported that statistic numerous times, but it still astounds me to this day the kind of grip Big Pharma has over US lawmakers. On top of that, the pharmaceutical industry also finances about 75% of the FDA's drug division. They own the lawmakers, they own the regulators. You tell me if there can be any other outcome other than carte blanche for Big Pharma in the US. In Europe, the political and regulatory landscape is a bit more challenging for Big Pharma to navigate, so perhaps not all too surprising that it was revealed by the New York Times that the $1.8 billion deal between Pfizer and the EU was sealed with private texts and calls between the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and Pfizer CEO, Albert Bourla. If the democratic landscape is too cumbersome, then let's just not do democracy. It's 2 years later, and still, nobody knows what was said or the details of how the deal got done. Quote, the European Court of Auditors wants to know how the bloc clinched its biggest COVID-19 vaccine contract and whether there was anything untoward in text messages between European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Pfizer chief Albert Bourla. So far, however, the EU budget watchdog's probe has been met with silence. Pfizer, they keep saying, why don't you trust us? Why don't you trust science? Well, maybe it's got something to do with all of these backroom deals, the lack of accountability, the refusal to take any responsibility for the product, and also not taking any questions from elected representatives or the media. Things of that nature is maybe why we don't trust Big Pharma. Maybe if you do some of those things, the public will trust you more. Now, countries with less bargaining power than the EU or the US, even more egregious exchanges took place. This headline tells it all. Held to ransom, Pfizer plays hardball in COVID-19 vaccine negotiations with Latin American countries. Quote, Pfizer has been accused of bullying Latin American governments during negotiations to acquire its COVID-19 vaccine, and the company has asked some countries to put up sovereign assets, such as embassy buildings and military bases, as a guarantee against the cost of any future legal cases, according to an investigation by the UK-based Bureau of Investigative Journalism. For the sake of fair reporting, I must also add that Pfizer declined to comment on the allegations about its demands in the negotiations, citing, quote, privacy and confidentiality. Mob-like behavior demanding embassies and military bases. That's a mighty fine country you got there. Be a real shame if something were to happen to it.
Richer and more powerful than ever, underpinned by its influence networks, the pharmaceutical industry stands unchallenged in its ability to dictate government health policies.
The industry's power is comparable to that of a state.
The pharmaceutical industry is so rich and so powerful. Its lobbying affects Congress.
Unchallenged in its ability to dictate government health policies. So rich that their power is comparable to that of a sovereign state. They have too much power. In the US, they own Congress, they own the media, and they want to own you. If this is something that you don't want, it's time to prioritize this issue. One common critique that I get all the time is that I spend too much time identifying the problem, but not enough on the solution. Well, I think here's the first step to solving this problem. No more voting for people who take Big Pharma money. Automatic disqualification. I mean, how could they possibly do a good job representing you and I if their boss is Big Pharma? Not possible. These companies, they're designed to maximize profit, and the people who work within that ecosystem will ensure that it happens. So we can wax poetic all day long about taking on the greed of Big Pharma, as many presidents and members of Congress have done over the years, but all of that will remain mostly immoral posturing, purely theoretical, until we act to remove the blatant conflict of interest that pervades our government and big business. That is all from me this time. I hope you found today's segment about just how powerful Big Pharma is to be helpful. I make a ton more videos like this breaking down these kinds of topics on my YouTube channel, 5149 with James Lee. I would encourage you to check it out and subscribe. Link will be in the description below. Of course, keep on tuning into Breaking Points, and thank you so much for your time today.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.